Welcome, everyone. Good morning. I'm Kimberly Charrington, and on behalf of the National Institute for Deterrence Studies, or NIDS, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Huessy Seminar. Is China seeking nuclear superiority? Unpacking 2025 developments with Rick Fisher, author and senior fellow at International Assessment and Strategy Center. If you'd like to explore more of our work, including upcoming events, publications, and global security review, research reports, and podcasts, please visit us at thinkdeterrence.com. We're adding new speakers and content weekly, so be sure to check back often and follow us on social media to stay informed. If you and your colleagues would like to receive future invitations right to your inbox, just email us at nids@thinkdeterrence.com and we will get you on our invite list. Throughout today's presentation, we encourage you to submit your questions using the chat or the Q&A button at the top of your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A portion of the seminar. Now, I'm delighted to introduce our host for today's discussion, Mr. Peter Huessy, President and Senior Director of Strategic Deterrence Studies at Geostrategic Analysis and a Senior Fellow here at NIDS. Peter, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Kimberly. I appreciate it. I want to welcome our guests today, in particular our speaker, Rick Fisher. I asked Rick to discuss 5 things. One is, what are the numbers of what China is doing in terms of its strategic nuclear forces? And then what are their objectives or ambitions that flow from that? What are they going to do with this stuff? And therefore, what's the purpose of their buildup? Is it simply what many people think they're just deterring their adversaries, whomever they may be? And then the fourth point is impact on their security and our security, which is why we should be concerned. And the final point is, which I hope Rick addresses to some degree, is China going to ally with other adversaries in terms of taking on the United States, whether that is North Korea or whether it's Russia or, God forbid, a nuclear-armed Iran. So, Dr. Fisher, I want to thank you for joining us today. This is a regular occurrence every year. We do a threat briefing from you, and next week we'll hear from our friends Mark Schneider and Steve Blank about what the Russians are up to in terms of numbers and their forces, as well as what's the purpose, which is what Steve will go into some detail about what threats they're saying. So, Rick, on behalf of Jim Petrovsky, who's our president, and our staff here at NIDS, and myself, I want to thank you for taking the time and coming to talk to us today. Over to you, sir.
Peter, as well as Kimberly and Jim, thanks once again for this invitation to review Chinese strategic nuclear developments. Kimberly, first slide, please. Yeah, I'm going to try to push through about 11 slides today, and the summary is simply that I'll be looking at why China seeks nuclear supremacy. I'll be reviewing the Defense Intelligence Agency's rare but very interesting revelation from May of 2025, a threat projection, a rare future threat projection that gave us specific Chinese numbers. And then I attempt to combine a projection based on the DIA numbers with the very interesting and unprecedented information provided by Dr. Hui Zhang, PhD, University of Beijing, now an expert at the Harvard Belfer Center, who was given privileged, unique, at a minimum, access to Chinese information on nuclear warhead development, and provides details that have not yet been covered in any American, especially U.S. government, open source sources. I'll then be looking at nuclear naval, nuclear air developments, and this year looking at potential FOBs capabilities. FOBs, not just the single-use DF-5C or other missiles that we can see today, but also how FOBs is being expanded potentially across a much larger fleet of reusable space launch vehicles. And then I'll be looking at how China is energizing its proxies. First, North Korea, and the last year, very interestingly, how it has been energizing and projecting its nuclear proxy, Pakistan. And then finally, some comments on PLA efforts to build a national missile defense, or a red dome, if you will. Next slide, please. Okay, why does the Chinese Communist Party and its People's Liberation Army seek nuclear superiority? And what is that? In our pre-event discussions, Peter Huessy very correctly pointed me to that question. What would be nuclear superiority? And quite simply, it would be enough nuclear weapons, either on its own or in combination, especially with Russia, North Korea, Pakistan, enough nuclear weapons to call up the American leadership and compel them to act as the party dictates. That's what nuclear superiority would be. Now, nuclear superiority is also very important for the internal maintenance of the Chinese Communist Party's dictatorship. By having nuclear superiority, it can project to the Chinese people that it can produce that level of victory and impress average Chinese that its power is unassailable, that they dare not challenge the dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party. Nuclear superiority, of course, would be a determinant in future confrontations with the United States over Taiwan. Japan has been a target of veiled Chinese nuclear threats over the past 2 months. In the future, China requires nuclear superiority in order to sustain its leadership of its early Axis of Evil coalition and acknowledgement of primacy in other looser coalitions like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS Plus, or a future Islamic NATO that it is currently underwriting, as well as nuclear deterrent to cover future aggression by Russia beyond Ukraine, North Korea, against South and Japan, and again, aggression by Islamic NATO, potentially against Israel. Should American leadership fade, of course, nuclear superiority would bolster the Chinese Communist Party's claim to take America's place. And as China more vocally promotes its model as superior and more desirable to that of American, Western, pluralist, democratic models, achievement of nuclear superiority reinforces that claim at a raw power level. And then finally, as the Chinese Communist Party projects its power into space, the moon, Mars, and beyond, I mean, they have plans to occupy the solar system. Nuclear superiority on Earth helps to deter and control potential conflicts on the moon and beyond. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I am most grateful for the Defense Intelligence Agency's May 2025 future threat projection, revealed in a single form page PDF that I'm sure most of you have seen and studied. And what I'd like to do is offer some comments on the Chinese numbers at least. 700 ICBMs, 132 SLBMs by 2035. I would simply offer that that's perhaps a bit low. I would expect the Chinese to be capable of achieving higher numbers than that over the next decade. And looking at, for example, the SLBMs, 132 SLBMs works out to 11 SSBNs if they continue to simply arm those boomers with just 12 missiles. However, the next generation Type 096 is assessed by multiple analysts as likely being larger, carrying more SLBMs. Thus, that total would naturally grow. The number for boosted hypersonic weapons is quite attention-grabbing, 4,000. Of course, that would include non-nuclear theater-level platforms. And I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if it also includes potential delivery of hypersonic glide vehicles on reusable space launch vehicles configured for FOBs missions. And I'll discuss that in a later slide. There are 16 Chinese space launch vehicle companies developing reusable SLVs. That's something that we have to really pay attention to. And a future DIA projection, if it comes to pass, and I certainly hope it does, I hope that they include an assessment of North Korean SLBMs, seeing as they've just revealed their first SSBN. And of course, Pakistan now has an ICBM program and is looking for a second strike capability. Next slide, please. Okay, in November, the PLA strategic watching community was done an enormous service by Dr. Hui Zhang, who received his PhD from the University of Beijing, did a stint at Princeton, and is now in residence as a China nuclear and policy expert at Harvard's Belfer Center. Kind of following on the example of a guy named Huadi, who in the 1980s struck up a relationship with well-known authors at Stanford University, gained a chair at Stanford, and then went on to produce unprecedented in detail analysis of PLA missile programs using his unique privileged access at the time. Huadi was trained as a rocket scientist by the Soviets in the 1950s. And that's how he was able to basically educate the world about the Chinese missile program, which also enhanced China's deterrent credibility. But when he went back to China in 1998, he was jailed. That's kind of another story. Well, Hui Zhang has also been given some kind of unique access to the history of Chinese nuclear testing and nuclear warhead development, filling a major gap in at least the open sector understanding of China's nuclear weapons potential. And that his book was released for sale on Amazon the same week that China revealed its latest State Council nuclear policy white paper is also, shall we say, most interesting. Now, Hui Zhang has offered a couple of particular details. He has outlined the development of two small warheads that are now in use by the PLA. One is a 200 kilogram warhead, 425 kiloton yield, called the 535 warhead, and then a smaller 110 kilogram warhead, 95 kiloton yield, called the 5x5 warhead. Now, in early December, Carnegie Foundation hosted a program for Dr. Zhang, hosted by his compatriot, Dr. Tong Zhao. Those who follow the debate over China's nuclear arsenal should be quite familiar with Dr. Zhao and Dr. Zhang. His book is well worth acquiring. Now, I've also taken liberties. I attended the briefing and took a picture of one of his charts in which Hui Zhang speculates or provides an example to illustrate the potential multiple warhead capabilities of current Chinese ICBMs and the JL-3 SLBM. Next slide, please. Now, I knew this was coming. I knew this was a demand from the listening audience that what would happen if we put the DIA Boffins and Hui Zhang around the same table? What kind of picture could they come up with? Provided they wanted to work towards that goal and the such. I don't know that will ever happen. We certainly shouldn't hold our breath waiting for that to happen. So I've taken a stab at it here. And what I've done is I've taken the DIA projections of 700 ICBMs, 132 SLBMs for 2035, worked out a potential breakdown in terms of current and possible future missiles, and then taken Hui Zhang's projected MIRV totals for the 535 and the 5x5 warheads to work out subtotals for these missiles and their numbers. Now, I understand, of course, this is speculation, but hopefully you'll agree, marginally informed speculation. And of course, the total numbers are just that. It doesn't account for how many would be used for decoys, for example. Just to give us a sort of ballpark estimate of where they could be headed. Again, provided they had the fissile materials and the manufacturing capacity to achieve these numbers. A fully separate issue that I really do not cover in this brief. But at any rate, if the ICBM numbers were married with estimates based on Hui Zhang's MIRV warhead totals, I arrive at a warhead total for the 535 warhead between 3,000 and 4,100. For the 5x5 warhead, it's higher, of course, smaller warhead, over 6,000 to just over 8,000. Now, these are large numbers, but not too far off from estimates that I've offered in previous years, and in the ballpark of numbers offered by the esteemed Mark Schneider, who you will hear from next week. All right, moving on to naval nuclear trends. It is my analysis that the PLA Navy is approaching 8 modern boomers, Type 094, Type 094As. The projection for 8 is something that has been around at least since 2015, congressional testimony by Admiral Locklear, and more recent research by Dr. Sarah Kirchberger. There is at least one Chinese source from earlier this year that asserts the number of 094s has reached 9. But what's also important is that the latest version of the 094, the 094A, uses a pump jet to achieve far greater stealth. Now, in 2023, General Anthony Cotton told us that the 094s are being equipped with a new SLBM, the JL3. Huessy Seminar estimates, 5 to 8 5x5 warheads, which for the total fleet of 6 or 11, 11 094s, that would bump them up to either 660 or 1056 warheads. The next generation, Type 096, is reported to be larger, possibly up to 16 SLBM tubes. And earlier in the decade, China greatly increased the nuclear submarine production capacity of its Bohai construction yard. And it is now churning off nuclear submarines, particularly new Type 093B nuclear attack submarines, to be followed by the Type 095. The numbers that are being examined point me to the conclusion that by the early 2030s, the Chinese Navy could be pursuing a considerable anti-American SSBN strategy in addition to protecting its own SSBNs. Next slide, please. One huge revelation for 2025 in terms of the airborne leg of China's nuclear arsenal is that its projected next generation, potentially stealthy flying wing, often called H-20 strategic bomber, will likely be preceded by an unmanned bomber almost the same size as the American next generation B-21 flying wing stealth bomber. A number of images of this aircraft taken by private sector satellites on the runway, and images of this aircraft in flight have been released. And of course, generous Chinese artist propaganda bots have done usual projections indicating that this unmanned bomber could have intercontinental range and also carry the new JL-1 air-launched ballistic missile that we've been seeing in Chinese internet revealed images hanging from the H-6 November, and of course recently revealed in far greater detail at the September 3rd PLA parade in Beijing. This simply adds to projections of numbers, complicates the defensive task of the United States and its allies. And on top of this, China is also producing aerial tankers. A few days ago, the Lowy Institute of Australia produced an estimate that the PLA Air Force could have about 100 aerial tankers by 2035. And China has long had an interest in flying boom tankers in addition to Hogan-Droege tankers. I would watch for modifications of the future C-929 Chinese civil airliner, which is going to be about the same size as a Boeing 787. Next slide, please. Okay, reusable space launch vehicles. DIA projected that in 2035, China would have 60 FOBs platforms. During the September parade, announcers described the Dongfang 5 Charlie in a way that described it may have a FOBs variant. Be that as it may, there is a far more important potential FOBs capability that is going to be quickly emerging over the next 5 years, and that is the truly a kind of tidal wave of Chinese reusable space launch vehicles. China is doing to this sector what it has done to so many other sectors: unmanned systems, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles. It is basically providing the backing to any grouping, corporation, existing new corporation that wants to produce this capability, can prove that it can produce this capability here. Take this lunch money, take this R&D money, and just go do it. There are at least 16 Chinese companies that are now developing reusable space launch vehicles. And the smart ones are already lining up mega satellite constellations to justify subsidies and investment capital. It's not happening with all of them yet, so this sector could see some shaking out. I mean, the China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation, CASIC, recently sold its sort of commercial solid space launch vehicle company. Not clear who bought it yet, but I mean it's been released to survive in the Chinese controlled market, if you will. So it has more flexibility and may have a better chance of succeeding. But how many space launch vehicles will China make? I mean, if you consider that all of these companies think they're going to be a potential SpaceX, that's quite a bit to get your head around. And there are at least 2 of these companies that are developing Starship size first stage reusable SLVs. Now, we also have to consider that this sector is also completely controlled by the People's Liberation Army. So it will serve People's Liberation Army goals. And that could include that each of these companies develop a militarized military mission second stage for these first stage reusable SLVs. And that second stage could do so many things, contribute to military satellite repopulation, put loft space combat platforms, or move the PLA missile capability from one of ever larger one-way nuclear strikes to even more massive non-nuclear reusable SLV strikes. Non-nuclear hypersonic glide vehicles or other warheads would possibly, in the PLA calculation, run a lower risk of nuclear retaliation. But it also heralds a very uncertain age when global strike can be undertaken from the homeland and can be very accurate and very tailored. For example, they know where I live. They can turn off this program by simply taking out my house. It's that level of specificity that we're looking at. And the DIA's projection of 4,000 Chinese boosted hypersonic weapons by 2035 is to me an indication of the breadth of this future threat that we have to consider. All right, next slide, please. Okay, China also spent 2025 activating its two current major nuclear proxies. The big development for North Korea, of course, was the revelation around Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, of their nuclear SSBN. It was revealed in a brief snip of a picture earlier in March of last year, but the full image of this SSBN was given out on Chinese state media or North Korean state media on Christmas. Thank you, Kim Jong-un, for that present. It's a very uniquely configured SSBN. I'm very taken by H.I. Sutton's analysis of what this portends. 8 very large SLBM tubes, the size of which suggests that the missile could be much longer than existing North Korean SLBMs, and potentially even based on for example, the Hwasong-18, a kind of what I assess to be a DF-41 size solid fuel ICBM. Now, there is also considerable reporting about a potential covert takeout of a Russian cargo ship that was carrying 2 salvaged nuclear power plants from a retired Russian Delta-class SSBN. No telling who sunk the Russian ship, although Spanish investigators believe it was taken out by a supercavitating torpedo. Who has those? It's a very short list. But there are 37 retired Deltas. So if the Russians indeed are supplying the power plants for the North Korean SSBN, there's quite an inventory for them to draw from, and they could start shipping them much over rail or in over sea in regions much closer to North Korea. The North Korean SSBN also has kind of unique, very large flank sonar arrays. I wonder if these are intended for active sonar use to just flood a future SSBN bastion with noise so that the new North Korean 96 missile destroyer and potential assistance from Chinese or Russian forces close to North Korean SSBN bastions can come in and assist the defense. And of course, this SSBN is now a proliferation option, and Pakistan is in the market. Next slide, please. And one of the amazing China-related nuclear developments of the last year has been the energizing of the Pakistani proxy nuclear relationship. This was declared on September 17 of last year when Saudi Arabia and Pakistan signed their Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement, SMDA. It had been under discussion for years, according to some commentary. And Pakistani officials made clear very quickly that it included the commitment of Pakistan's nuclear weapons to the defense of Saudi Arabia. Very quickly, Iranian officials made statements that they would like to join the SMDA and suggested it could grow into a regional pact. In early January, noise began building that Turkey had already made an attempt to join the pact. And then on January 15, Reuters cited Pakistani sources saying that a draft of a tripartite Saudi, Pakistan, Turkey defense agreement has been around for at least 10 months. Egypt apparently had been part of these discussions. So once this tripartite agreement is realized, perhaps Egypt would be a quick join. The Gulf states may take a little longer, but chances are good that they will also join. Iran, if the theocratic dictatorship survives, at least could be invited by Saudi Arabia, given their China brokered rapprochement of 2023, or perhaps a post-theocratic Iran may be interested in joining. Now, it's China that gains tremendously from this growing, shall we say, Islamic NATO, if that's what it becomes, because its nuclear deterrent capability has been provided largely by China. If you look at the images of the Chinese or the Pakistani Ababil missile, the Nasser tactical nuclear system, the jet that's carrying the Rod cruise missile, these are all made possible by China. The tells especially by CASIC. And it's in as much as the Biden administration revealed in December 2024 that Pakistan had an ICBM program, it's certainly logical to presume that Chinese technology will be at the base of that future capability. And there are also interesting reports that Pakistan has been looking for a second strike capability, and that North Korean SSBN must be looking quite attractive. But Pakistan is also going to be co-producing non-nuclear conventional Chinese attack submarines. So perhaps that could form the basis of a non-nuclear ballistic missile capability, looking sort of similar to the Chinese type 032 conventional ballistic missile launching test submarine. And it's also very interesting that in early 2025, China has sold Pakistan a private commercial 20 surveillance satellite network that most likely will enable Pakistan to conduct global targeting of its future strategic nuclear systems. So would an nuclear Islamic NATO take the place of China's proxy, the theocratic Iranian dictatorship, in leading regional conflict against Israel? Would it be the vehicle that China uses to displace American influence in the Middle East? And will Islamic NATO readily deploy military assistance to Pakistan in future conflicts with India? All questions that come to mind. And then the next slide, please, the last slide. PLA made a great, very important reveal in the September parade, confirming publicly the existence of its HQ-29 anti-missile interceptor. Unconfirmed Chinese sources on X soon after the parade held that it's a 3-stage missile, could have a 5,000 kilometer range, and an interception altitude out to 2,500 kilometers, and being armed with a kinetic kill vehicle. So we have essentially a kind of something approaching a mid-course ABM. And we can expect there'll be ground-launched versions, including the TEL-launched versions, and follow-on missiles. China has at least 5 long-range phased array missiles, and its satellite early warning network consists of about 7 or 8 satellites. Now, these could support China is developing launch on warning strategies, but it also signals the potential breakout of a early national missile defense capability, a sort of red dome, if you will. And this capability has been assisted in no small part by Russia. And I've reviewed statements in previous presentations and include them in this slide. Okay, well, I've been droning on for close to 40 minutes now, and I'll stop and thank you for tuning in. I wish all of you a safe weekend, especially if you're in the path of Snowmageddon. And now, Peter, thank you again, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Rick. I have a series of questions. Let me walk through them. We talked about this earlier. How does the CCP and China view deterrence? Is it stopping an adversary from attacking them, or is it stopping in a country like America from coming to the defense of our allies, which have been attacked by China?
Yeah, Peter, it's both, but those who analyze this question in greater depth than I always come back to the compellence aspect of what the Chinese hope to achieve. So yes, they're very much in the business of forcing adversaries to comply with desired action, usually very detrimental to the interests of the enemy.
Let me ask you a question that came up in the chat was, if the Chinese are seeking superiority, which implicitly says more warheads than the United States has, how does bumping up against Russian limits affect where China is going to go? Do they stop short of being superior to Russia, or do they not care?
No, Russia is very much a future adversary.
Okay.
The current alliance, as it is with Russia, is in my opinion based purely on transactional, for the moment, goals.
Okay.
Everybody remembers the Hitler-Stalin Pact.
Okay.
No one in Beijing or Moscow has any illusions that if after this alliance puts the Americans in a far worse position, that they will be squaring off against each other, that China will be going after access and control of a lot of Siberia, reclaiming lost territories and the such, and I'm sure both the Russians and the Chinese are looking at the recent history of Greenland to look for ways to potentially sort that out.
Okay. I have a question on China has said its narrative has been China have a policy of minimal deterrence, no first use, and a retaliatory only strategy. What's your sense as to whether this narrative is correct?
Well, Peter, even if it's 1,000% true, and Xi Jinping next week takes President Trump on a tour of all PLA rocket force missile bases to prove that the warheads are all separately stored under quadruple lock and key. We still cannot base our own security on anything they say or do. That's sort of an absolutist perspective, one that I would hope occurs naturally to any serious American security planner. But that said, they certainly want us to believe in their declaratory policies. And, just like they wanted us to believe since the Strategic Defense Initiative that missile defense was the worst initiative ever that any power could conceive in terms of the future strategic balance, and that we were basically evil and wrong for even thinking about missile defense, only to find out that for at least the last 15 years, the Chinese have been developing their own missile defense capabilities. So when we also have to consider the far longer Chinese history of incorporating deception into all levels of statecraft.
Yes.
And that is, in my opinion, what is really at the basis of their declaratory nuclear policies.
I have a two-part question, and that is a couple people. One is a gentleman who is at the University of Chicago who has been looking very seriously at the Chinese demographic problems. And he says China is really not a threat because demographically they're about to fall off a cliff. That's number one. Number two, he also says that economically they're in such dire straits that economically they won't be able to pose much of a threat to the United States, despite offshoring our manufacturing. I don't agree with his view on this, but it's a view held by some where, oh well, in a few years we don't have to worry about this. What's your sense of this?
When you're looking at a tsunami wave, it's really hard to look beyond it and consider that it's going to evaporate before it reaches the shore. Even if your colleague is correct, and into the 2030s, China begins to experience great demographic and economic disruption. Well, that'll certainly be a relief in terms of the long term, but in the shorter term, we still have to win the Battle of Taiwan, the Battle of the Ryukyus. India has to win the Battle of Arunachal Pradesh. We have to win the Battle of the Philippines potentially, and I mean, if China obtains new populations, it already has. Communist China already has a history of using conquered populations for military adventures. I mean, the first wave of Chinese invaders in Korea in 1950-51 were captured Kuomintang soldiers that lost the Chinese Revolution, and we can expect that the youth of Taiwan will be deployed in multiple directions, if perhaps the demographics affects PLA recruiting at some point in the not too distant future. So I'm looking at the Chinese Communist Party, its capacity to survive, its capacity to do far worse than what the Iranian dictatorship has done in the last 2 weeks in order to survive, and its ability to mobilize captured populations for future military adventures.
What is the Chinese view of missile defense, both ours and theirs?
Well, I think for most of the last 40 years, they've preferred that we not have it, which to some degree, others may disagree, but in a sense, we specifically limited our missile defense capabilities over the last 20 years to accommodate Chinese concerns. We limited our own missile defense to targeting the North Korean capability in the hopes of not prompting the Chinese also to follow suit, or the Russians for that matter. That was, in my opinion, an unfortunate calculus, because I don't think the Chinese had any intention of denying missile defense capabilities for themselves. I mean, since the mid 1990s, they've been developing ground-based interceptors, ground-based lasers, and now the degree of missile defense capability they're deploying is basically the first round of a national missile defense system that will become more complex and deeper in the coming decade.
There's another, it's currently on the web, I was listening to it the other day, is that there's a sense that the new form of warfare is going to be primarily drones being launched at each other from space, and that it makes nuclear weapons irrelevant, primarily because the speed with which the drones can get to where they're going, which is basically and that you can't shoot them all down, and therefore that's a new form of warfare that makes it somewhat irrelevant whether you have nuclear weapons or not. I'm curious. I know didn't ask you originally, but this is not an uncommon refrain that you hear now, even military analysts making that case.
Well, nuclear deterrence is alive and well in Ukraine. The Russians have not yet used the tactical nuclear weapons. I'd like to think that they've been deterred from doing that. All the while, the most dangerous and complex drone warfare has been unfolding since 2022. Drone warfare is simply an additional burden on humanity, Peter. I don't think that it replaces the nuclear burden. The nuclear burden, actually, as we see in Ukraine, makes it more possible, in as much as we're not delivering tailored sub-kiloton weapons yet against the core centers of drone capacity. I'm far more worried about massive nuclear warhead exchanges being succeeded by massive exchanges of non-nuclear warheads. This is something that could combine the intimate precision of a drone with the protection of launching warfare from your homeland and hypersonic speeds that greatly challenge defensive systems. And frankly, we're not contracting SpaceX to build 500 Falcon reusable launchers for this level of warfare. I am greatly concerned that the People's Liberation Army definitely has plans to contract the 16 or however many future reusable space launch vehicle companies to, in addition to their commercial ambitions, also fulfill the PLA's weaponized reusable SLV ambitions.
I'm going to turn the chat over to my boss, Jim Petrosky, our president, and see if he has some questions for you.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. This is really enlightening, and we're getting a lot of input from folks and looking at the difference between China's and the U.S. deterrence. There's a lot going on. It wasn't really hit here in terms of some of the work that's being done in the in NATO. You know, it's hit the news this week, obviously, with Greenland and some of the work there. What are you finding out is China's reaction to all this from a deterrence standpoint, but also from an aggression standpoint, and where do you think that all fits in?
Great question. I spend a bit of time on the third level Chinese state media website called Guancha. Guancha is different from Global Times and the more usual People's Daily, China Daily, and the such, that Guancha reaches out to approved academic rationalizers and spokespeople for the objectives and policies of the Chinese Communist Party. They don't ever tell us directly what they're going to do, what they mean. I mean, that's the essence of a Chinese Communist Party. That's what you do. And with 5,000 years of Chinese strategic statecraft on top of that, it's just doubly impenetrable. But on Guancha, you see a lot of cheering about how the Greenland episode has surfaced fissures in the NATO alliance. A great amount of cheering about how the capture of Maduro is ending the rules-based order. So the Chinese are using our actions as they have for decades, using our actions to create political warfare pressure to advance their goals. What they're not really talking about is how they are creating nuclear-armed alliance structures that could very quickly challenge or even displace the alliance and proto-alliance structures of the United States. They've been casting. Shanghai Cooperation Organization has been around for quite a while, but it has essentially taught the potential Islamic NATO how to come together. The future Islamic NATO has already been sitting around the same table of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And the dialogue partner, Middle Eastern dialogue partners of the SCO are the potential first round members of the Islamic NATO, if you will. And China's arming of the Islamic NATO, I think, has been a long-term plan. It is certainly being facilitated by the arming of Pakistan, which could move to include other members of the Islamic NATO, probably starting with the Saudis. That is not something that has gone into great depth on Guancha, but it is definitely an agenda that also seeks to exploit the so-called mistakes of the United States and our allies.
Yeah, Rick, it sounds like your work and the work of many hands are going to be full for the next decade or so. So, given the upcoming weather and such, since you won't be able to go out and drive, we'll look forward to your continued interest in this area, because you'll have maybe some time on your hands for this. We've reached our end hour at 11 o'clock. Unfortunately, Kimberly's it seems like we're having some technical problems with Kimberly getting back in, so I'm going to close this out right now. And I won't be able to do it as nicely as our producer Kimberly does, but I want to thank our audience for coming in. And I tell everyone, get the word out on these seminars. They're extremely important to get the word out, and our organization's responsibility is to make people aware of the challenging concepts that are related to deterrence and how deterrence keeps us peaceful and prosperous. But there are a lot of people a lot of organizations, a lot of countries, a lot of things out there that are just trying to push back on that. So again, my sincere thanks to Rick Fisher for doing this. Peter Huessy, as always, you are such a great guy at doing this. And so I'm going to close this out by saying, if you want to know what's going on at NIDS, come to our website at thinkdeterrence.com. Find out what's going on. This will be posted on our YouTube channel, along with the ability to get the slides. If you have questions, further questions, you can address them on the YouTube, or send us those questions back at nids@thinkdeterrence.com, and we will address them. And so without any further ado, stay warm, stay safe. Rick, as always, we always look forward to this. So have a good day, and remember to think deterrence.
Thank you very much, Rick. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jim, for closing us out, and want to thank our audience. We will see you next week, next Friday. And so I'll take care. We'll see you in a week.
Thank you.